How about we get started? Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this Okra webinar. I'm Zach, part of the Okra team, and I just wanted to quickly speak to you before I hand over to David, the coordinator, about the question and answers. As you'll see in the Zoom webinar mode, there is a button in the bottom which says Q&A. And if you go there, you can write down your questions to the Okra team during the presentations, but all of them will be answered at the end. That way, if your question already gets answered during the presentations, there's no need to double up on time. So now I'll hand it over to David.
Right, good morning, everybody, and welcome from the Okra project team. We look forward to working with you over the next 4 years. Congratulations on your successful bids. If you are on the webinar, you would have submitted the most competitive bid for your platform in your country. So congratulations for that. I have been part of the Géant and NREN cloud community since 2016, and would just like to share a couple of observations that I've made over the past few years. Firstly, the appetite from the research and education community in Europe for cloud services has grown exponentially since 2016. And I think this presents a huge opportunity for the market, for yourselves. Secondly, what I have seen is the suppliers that really invested in a relationship with the local national research and education networks and harnessed this relationship to provide webinars, training, participated in community events, and engaged the local R&E community through the NREN, have been very successful. So please reach out to your local NREN, develop this relationship. It is going to be a really important relationship. You will hear a little bit later in this webinar about the Okra funding initiative. I would urge you to participate in that, to respond to any mini competitions you see, where Okra will be funding research projects to create great case studies that can be used by the European Open Science Cloud, by Géant, by the NRENs, and by yourself, the suppliers. So I would urge you to look for those and participate in those. That's all I have. I'd like to hand you over to Olaf, who is the Géant head of procurement and responsible for the procurement team in Okra. Olaf.
Yeah, here you are. Yes, good morning, everybody. My name is indeed Olaf Schoor. I'm head of procurement at Géant. And in the Okra project, I was the procurement specialist heading the tender and all other procurement activities. So you most likely would have come across my name during this this project. I would like to welcome you as well, as David just did, and congratulate you on the awarding of the project of the contracts. I will just give you a very brief overview of the steps we have taken so far and why we are here now, before handing my presentation over to my colleagues, which will go into a bit further details on the following steps. The Okra project has a relatively long history. Formally, it started off in January 2019. But even before that, there were current for the IaaS frameworks of Géant IaaS frameworks, which have been tendered in 2015. And these were actually, well, let's say the starting point of this whole process. And somewhere in 2018, a decision's been made to start on the Okra project, which might be a bit more research focused, or looking at a broader community than the IaaS frameworks. But basically, these two have been combined, resulting in the tender process you've been going through. That process formally kicked off in between October and August 2019, when we published the PIN notice of in the sense to start engaging with the market, testing the grounds, if you like. That resulted in a 0.9 version of the tender for all parties that participated in the PIN process, and formally the tender was published in 2020 in April. As you are aware, you've all sent in your proposals in June, and we are now more than halfway in our contract awards process. We have taken this route because we were very aware of the fact that we were trying to combine many different things in this tender, and the pre-information notice and the 0.9 version of the tenders, we found that we needed to have them to understand your view on this market, but also to test ideas we were having ourselves. But also manage expectations, not least on the contract and the legal side of this, because we are very aware that you are all coming from a different background, all have your own platforms, and somehow we needed to sculpture that in a more or less one-size-fits-all approach, yet having as many viable companies aboard. That resulted in the publication of the tender, and besides the formal publication of that, we also invested in bringing this tender to your attention, using the Ayn Rand, using social media, and that's we like to think of ourselves that we've done a good job, because in the end we received just under 1,200 bids over the various countries we were using this, and in the end that resulted in just over nearly 1,150 valid bids we need to evaluate and score. Well, as you might notice, that the scoring and assessment process took us a bit longer than initially planned. We had initially the planning to do the awarding process in a number of waves, looking at countries where there was significant usage of the current IaaS frameworks, award them first, and then move along Europe basically, towards countries where there was a bit less pressure on ending existing frameworks. But that was proven a bit differently, because there were obviously many connections, companies offering a bid for a country where there was usage and no usage, but we had to make sure that all proposals were evaluated the same, and that we were consistent in our scoring, etc. So we had to reinvent the wheel a couple of times during the evaluation and scoring process, because obviously we needed to do that thorough and consistent, but also respecting all the interest of all the parties, while observing the legislation on public procurement. And this whole process resulted in the awarding of a total of 473 frameworks across the whole of Europe. We are contracting in total 27 different cloud platforms, either directly with the OIP and sometimes via resellers of that OIP. And in a number of countries where we have the least number of platforms available, there will still be 8 platforms available. And think of countries as like Armenia or Azerbaijan, where that is the case. And the maximum number of platforms we would have available in one country is 19, and that is only the case in the UK, because that is the country where most of the platforms will be available to our community. Well, the main topic of this webinar are obviously the next steps, because what I've just been told you, that's well, you've been part of this process. I looked this yesterday evening, and at this moment we have 304 frameworks that are signed by both you and Jayant. So there are 169 pending frameworks to be signed. So I would really like to urge you to look into this process, and feel free to contact us if you have any questions, regardless if it's on the framework or on the process for signing. But this is one of at least one of my major priorities, to have all these contracts signed. Well, my colleagues are about to take over and this presentation. So one of the main watersheds, if you like, on with this webinar is that we are transitioning the process from a procurement process to a more daily operations process to the contract management team. And Gavin McFeely from HANet in Ireland will be telling you a bit more on that later on. Michel Wets from SURF in the Netherlands, he will give you some more details and background, if you do not know that yet, on the NRENs, the differences on the NRENs, and how to engage with the community. A sidestep on Okra, because in the Okra project there is adoption funding available. And that adoption funding will be well tendered between all of you during by the use of mini competitions. And Jan Meyer of Uninet will be telling something about that in the after this. And I also would like to mention the other members that are still part of the Okra team. That is Jacob Tindel and Michael Röder from DFN in Germany. We had our legal advisor Josip Mahonic from Croatia, and well, David Haynes was the project manager, but also Gary James and Yvonne van der Heuvel contributed on behalf of Jayant to this tender. Okay, that was it from me. So I think who is up next is Michel.
It is, I think. Good morning, everybody. Let me just switch to the presentation I prepared. Yeah, so like Olaf said, I'll be explaining a bit more about the differences between the NRENs, because we are a bunch which are alike but also different. So I'd like to start with the landscape. Many of you will notice, but some of you may not. Hence, I thought it'd be good to start here. So on the left-hand side, top left-hand side, you will see all the different of NRENs. These are a subset of them, and they are all united in.
Michel, we can't see your screen, I think.
Give me a sec. I thought that would be done automatically. My video is running, and I did share my screen. I can do it again.
Try sharing again, because maybe Olaf was already doing.
Okay. So, am I sharing now? I don't think so. You see the screen now?
Yep, there it is.
Okay, I apologize. Let me just see if I can. Yes, I can move it. Okay. I want to start with the landscape. This is the a subset of the NRENs on the top left. Like I said, we're all connected to Shayant. Shayant is our membership organization for which we collaborate in projects. And through Shayant, we apply and submit proposals to work on European projects like EOSC. Part of EOSC is the Okra project, and the Okra project led to the Okra tender, which you all submitted for. So there's now framework agreements in place between Shayant and the framework and you guys. And soon there will be call-off contracts if you are referred directly between yourselves and the institution, always in the center, or for Endurance acting as an underwriter, there will be a call-off contract between you and the Endurance, and the Endurance will ensure that it has a back-to-back agreement with the institution to ensure that they know that the terms and conditions are which they have to comply to, because in the end the contract is by the Endurance. And that also would mean that the Endurance normally receives the invoices from you, and they will, for all the institutions in the one contract, and they will ensure that the institutions play their part for the invoice. I'm really sorry that suddenly the Dutch Air Force decided to practice above my house. If you look at the institutions, how did we see this in the first couple of years of cloud services happening? Well, primarily, I think you have to realize that the education and research institutions are not the most agile organizations. They will take time, and they are thorough. And often you would have to answer questions from everybody in the decision-making process involved. And that goes from the procurement officers to the compliance officers. Administrators, architects, and IT managers always have something they want to find out. And cost managers, the costs are of interest always to board members and the IT managers. So be aware that you would find that these people will often be involved in the process, and be prepared to answer questions, especially in a referrer country that is primarily up to you, and you can rely on the end-to-end to share information and to contribute and to confirm information. But it will primarily be your job to persuade all these people that these are the best bits. What we found is that having reference cases, preferably in research and education, preferably in the country, but if not, at least in other countries, are a tremendous help. They really will help you persuade institutions. They are much more favorable looking at reference cases from their peers than they are from your sales brochures. I'm sorry, I know how good they are, but still. So if you don't have reference cases, we would really suggest that you invest in creating these and share them and take them with you once you start talking to an institution, because we found that nothing helps better than them having say, okay, I know these guys, and okay, they had the same challenge, and they chose you, and they were happy with you. I can give them a call, and they can confirm your ability to execute and to support them. So I think this is one of the takeaways I'd like you to understand, that this might help you. If we look at the typical cloud journey of the institutions, once we see that they've satisfied themselves that the contracts are valid and are advantageous to them, you normally would see they need a reason to start, and that could be somebody who wants who heard something and wants to test out something and do a pilot. It may also be that their VMware platform is end of life, or that they have to reinvest in their data centers. Normally they would go with pilot projects, soft launches before they start doing production moves. I think this is something you may, the biggest value, I think, one of the biggest values is that Okra offers you and the institutions an EU compliant procurement framework. they don't have to tender themselves. So if they have contracts with you, because most of them will have to tender by the European procurement legislations, you may find that they could merge them or migrate them into the Okra frameworks, and that would not necessitate a new tender by them. So that's something you could look at as well. Well, as I said before, the institutions are not the quickest movers, but if they go, they will go. Honestly, I think you would spend the first half year trying to inform institutions, have meetings with them, have meetings with NRENs virtually, obviously. I think you'd be happy if you could do pilot usage in Q3 and 4, generate use cases out of that. And I would be surprised, unless there's a really pressing need, if there was any real value production usage before Q1 next year. And I'm not saying there won't be any test cases. I'm not saying there won't be any institutions who will move fast, because there may be a perfect fit. But in all honesty, I think this will be valid from the end of this year, early next year onwards. Well, as you've read in the tender, there are two ways the NREN may act, and one of them is the referral role. And that is the case for the majority of the NRENs. And they will be your intermediary, and they will help you facilitate workshops, and they will confirm that they supported Okra, that you are the valid bidder. They may even share information where they've heard that there is a demand, but in all reality, it will be the majority of the work will come from you. You would have to go to these institutions, and you would have to interest them in the office, waving the carrot. It is EU compliant. You don't have to tender. This is done. This is used by other NRENs and other countries and other institutions. Hence, this is valuable for you. Please do actively involve the NREN cloud managers. They can help you, like I said, to confirm that it is that is supported, that you are a framework holder, and that they help you understand what is possible. Be also aware that there is not one size fits most, but all NRENs are different, and they would really appreciate if you contact them and you have a chat with them and introduce yourselves before they get a request from an institution. I got a call from this bloke or lady from the supplier. Do you know anything about it? So that's just general courtesy. The underwriters, okay, that's a different bunch. There are less of them, and they will take more roles and responsibilities. And here as well, it is not a case that every NREN acting as an underwriter will perform all these roles and responsibilities, but you would see in time they would move there. The biggest difference is that they will have a single contract with you, a call-off contract, and they will ensure that the institutions sign agreements with them for the usage and the meeting of the terms and conditions which are agreed upon, and that the invoices flow through the NREN. But they will also have a dedicated team to support. They should have a dedicated team to support the cloud service delivery, and create communities, and maybe look at it per sector and create a different community for researchers and a different one for universities of applied science, because they have different needs and often use different suppliers. So these NRENs should really not act on your behalf, because they will always be the independent advisors of the institution, the trusted advisors. But nevertheless, they will do a lot of work. They should do a lot of work in helping having the institutions understand the values of cloud services in general, and to further lower barriers by, for instance, sharing information, setting up newsletters, and facilitating workshops, and interacting with you. What are the most pressing needs, or where do we see a problem arising? Further suggestions. This is something we instigated in the Netherlands, and for you, those of you who are operating or who will be operating in the Netherlands, this is something we will ask from you, and I think we share on a European scale. Like Olaf said, there will be a large number of suppliers, and it will be difficult for institutions to understand the value of each of these suppliers. So in all reality, a small short document through which they can help generate a short list from whom they will understand and read all the tender documents would be very beneficial. And that can always be shared, also be shared by the end-runners and by the end-run cloud managers when they are talking to institutions. So we would really like you to collaborate here, or to invest in this, and create this 1 or 2 page PDF, which really explains what your value is, the value you bring to these contracts. And please, I mean, it's up to you what you put in there, but please don't make it a generic corporate marketing talk. Really try to understand what are, when you look at research and education, what are your niches? Where do you excel? And for which situations they really should look at your service portfolio. Because I think the more smart you are here, the better you stand out, and the better an institution quickly understands what you are about and how you can assist them. That's my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Michel.
Not sure who's next.
So we've got Garvin next.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm just going to start doing the slideshow. Grab me 1 second. Okay. It's the share slide button. Presentation, and we go. Okay. Are we seeing what we ought to be seeing?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, cool. Right. So my name is Garvin McFeely. I'm part of the Okra team, and I take care of the contract management side of these frameworks now that they're signed. So technically, we're going into a new phase. So the Okra project team has gone through and signed the framework contracts with all of you, and now we're moving into a new phase. And that new phase is where we have within Géant a project team that takes care of it, called the contract management group. What does the contract management group do? Well, we take care of the day-to-day operations of the frameworks. Okra handed over, as each framework is signed, the administration of that framework contract to the GN43 project. The contract management group is a part of this GN43 Géant project. The countries that are members of Géant are all countries that would have been scoped inside the tender pin, or the tender pin and tender documents that we released last year. So what do we do day to day? Well, every quarter, providers are obliged to provide us with a report. We gave you a template as to what that report would look like. So the technicalities of how we can get that in from you every quarter in as painless a fashion for you to send it to us and for us to process it and to action it. We're still teasing out the detail. As you can imagine, Ola has described huge volume of framework contracts that are being issued. There's a lot of complexity in this, and we need to just set it up so that we make things as painless for you and for us to process. The contract management group deals with change control requests. So, for example, you might wish to appoint a subcontractor in country to assist with the delivery of, say, training services or some professional services that you scoped into your tender. That results in a change control. It's a lightweight process, but that is dealt with through the contract management group. The contract management group deals with queries that providers might have about the framework. So we're your go-to people for that information. And we'll have an email address set up especially for this. So it's cloudcmg@jmclouds.microsoft.com that we will be starting to monitor in the coming days and weeks. There's nobody monitoring it today, so please don't blast a lot of stuff to it. If I go on to the next slide. So that's what we do. I suppose it's as important then to figure out what we don't do. So the contract management group, he said, trying to advance to the next slide. I'm failing miserably to do so. So what does the contract management group not do as important? So we don't have a list of contacts in institutions. We don't have that information. It's not something that we're able to field. So that's not what we do. We do not organize workshops or events in particular countries. That's up to the NRENs and the providers to figure that out. For any national promotional events, you need to get in touch with the point of contact that we will have on the websites that are being created. So there will be some resources available to you online to figure out who are the people I need to contact in country to organize these events. And we're not part of any of the operating of the funding calls that the Okra project undertakes. So the activities of Okra in terms of its mission to stimulate cloud adoption across Europe, that's not us. So if you come to us and say there's an Okra funding call, we'll just point you straight back to them because we don't have any hand, act, or part in that. At a broader level, the GN43 project, I'm sorry for its clunky name, works with the NRENs. We have a team of people within the GN43 project who engage with the NREN country managers, and we in this part of the project, we build up bundles of information. We have to have them accessible to institutions so that an end institution that wishes to procure through the framework has a painless way of doing it. GN43 organizes events about the framework, but that would be at the NREN level. So we might have maybe in Q2 of this year an event where we've got some information available to the NRENs to help them to drive adoption within the framework. And there will be, between the website content that Okra has, et cetera, there will be numerous sites for or numerous sources of content for where the call-offs are, how to get engaged, how to get a framework, how to get a call-off completed. So that's in a short presentation who we are or what we do. So I'll hand back to Zach.
Thanks, Gavin. So now we're handing the floor over to Jan.
Yep, doing the sharing presentation thing. So is this visible?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, good morning, everyone. I'll say a couple of words about the Okra adoption funding process. Jan Meyer, I work for Norwegian Enron Uninet, responsible for the Okra adoption funding. So just taking a step back and looking at Okra's purpose in life. So Okra will establish procurement vehicles, right? Establish a portfolio of commercial services in 2 service types as part of the European Open Science Cloud. Okra is a project executed within the context of the European Open Science Cloud. And that portfolio is then made available in the 40 green countries. And part of the Okra project is an adoption fund to stimulate the adoption of those commercial services by the research community. And then by doing all this, we contribute to EOSC's capability of how to do these types of things, how to provide access to commercial services for the multi-million number of researchers in the whole of Europe. And I have to point out that the Okra Adoption Fund, that's a thing that is separate from the purchases that can be made directly from any of the thousands of eligible contracting authorities in the green countries. So what does Okra want to do with the cloud adoption funding? Bit about the strategy. We have 3 million euros available for cloud infrastructure, cloud using projects. It's an interesting amount of money, but obviously it's a drop in the ocean, considering the number of institutions and countries in European research area. So what we're targeting is bigger research relevant projects that really show the rest of the research community how that portfolio of services, in your case, how infrastructure cloud services can help them to achieve great research outcomes. And what are then great research outcomes? That can be a number of things. It could be new outcomes which are enabled by the services. Maybe it allows them to do their research faster, for less money, higher quality. Maybe it allows smaller groups to achieve things that before were beholden to bigger institutions that have large IT infrastructures or IT departments. So improvements like that. And what Okra wants to get out of it, Dave touched upon it in the start, is we want to have inspiring showcases that show other researchers, that inspire other researchers to adopt infrastructure cloud services for their research, right? So those are the guiding principles behind our selection of projects. Just to give you an idea of what we're after and what type of projects we have selected. So we've done a first call for projects that closed in October last year, 31 proposals received. In December, we decided to award 15 of those, for which a total of 1.2 million euros of the previous amount has been allocated. That means that we have about 2.5 million remaining, for which the allocation strategy is to be decided. And that's because we first want to get some more experience with the 15 projects that we've awarded now and figure out, right, so how can we best utilize the remaining funding to contribute to the stimulation of demand for your services. This is the list of the projects that we've awarded funding to. I will not go into this here. You can see it in the presentations afterwards. But as you can see, it's pretty nicely spread out across the different countries and different disciplines. So what does this mean for you? In the start, I said this is a separate process from the regular ordering of services by institutions. This is something that the Okra project will do. So that means that Géant will run mini competitions to contract for services for each of these 15 projects. That means that we're expecting to run 15 different mini competitions as the Okra project for those adoption projects. And for each project, we'll invite the suppliers in the country of that project to participate in the mini competition. One requirement is that you do need to have a signed framework agreement in place, because otherwise, obviously, you can't participate in a mini competition. Something to point out already now is that you can expect a modified call-off contract, and that modification is mainly done to satisfy our own EU grant compliance requirements. I won't bother you with the details, but that's just how it has to be. It'll be, instead of a 2-party agreement, a 3-party agreement between Géant, the institution, and the supplier. One key aspect is that it's a three-party agreement for as long as our adoption funding, so the Okra adoption funding, is used for service consumption. And when either the project ends or when the adoption funding runs out, the contract novates, so moves over to being a two-party contract between the institution and the supplier. But obviously these details will be communicated clearly as part of each mini competition. What Géant will buy are vouchers for the value of the allocated adoption funding. So that means that you have to be able, or the platform that you're providing has to be able to support the notion of vouchers, because Géant buys vouchers, gives these to the awarded project. The awarded project uses the services and pays for those services with these vouchers. So voucher support is pretty crucial. I want to point out that these are mechanisms that we're trialing at the moment. So for us, this is also new. The outcomes of our experiences, those will inform the European Open Science Cloud's further development on making commercial services available to European researchers. So our current planning, as I said, it's a new approach for us as well. So we start carefully with 2 projects. That's what we're working on currently. And the ones that we selected to start are a project from the Netherlands, from the meteorologists, and a project from Spain. So the suppliers in the Netherlands and Spain can expect to be the first ones to be contacted. And the remaining planning will then be based on the experiences that we gain. And we're targeting to have the majority of those projects contracted for in the first quarter of 2021. So thank you. And if you have any questions about the adoption funding or any of the other presentations, then you can ask them now in the Q&A.
Thanks, Jan. All right, so now I'm going to go through the questions that have been asked, and I'm just going to go through them from the first one. And so the panelists will unmute if they know how to answer the question. So the first question, Andrea Livatino asked, good morning, may we exit with our own press release announcing the awarding? If not, when will it be possible? Thank you.
I can pick that up, Zach. The Okra project will be issuing a press release today in terms of the cloud contract and framework. And this press release will include a link to the Okra catalog. The catalog is not fully completed, but there will be a list of the countries or a map representing the countries that are represented in the framework. And if you click on each of these countries, you will get the NREN name, website, and contact details. There are a few of these contact details that we are still waiting for, and we will begin furnishing the supply information on this catalog within the next week. Certainly next week, and certainly by the end of next week, the catalog will be complete. But it is currently a work in progress, but it is active and live. So you can see what countries are represented and who the NRENs are. We will actually distribute our press release to each of you later today, and you will be able to use this for whatever press releases you yourselves are issuing.
Okay, and David, can I expand on that a bit? Because there's another question asked on which lots are still pending or have all contracts been awarded. The website David mentioning is aimed at you or at other people, but also aimed at the NREN in the institutes, informing them which frameworks agreements are available in their respective countries. We will be updating that website as long as it needs to be, in the sense, well, because not all, there are a few lots that have not been fully awarded, and frameworks that have not been signed by you. And obviously we will not mention any suppliers who have not signed their frameworks or have not signed any lots. We will not go into the details of the specifics on which suppliers have not signed or which slots have not been awarded. But obviously, you can distill that on that website, because if a country or a supplier, well, if a country is not mentioned, then obviously there's no contract awarded. And when all the contracts are signed, we have the obligation to finalize this whole project by publication naming all the companies we have been awarded the contract to. So that is pending, but we cannot make that publication until all the contracts are signed. And I know you've all been receiving an email asking for your contact details and supplier logo, if I'm not mistaken, and a link to your website. And I'm aware of the fact that not all responses are received yet. And well, if we have not received such a response, we can also not put your name on that website. So I really urge you, for those who for that one that it's applicable, to actually respond to that email. Thank you.
Thanks, Olaf. All right, so now the next question is, what is your recommendation for references for suppliers who are new to education in Ghent and have no references with accounts in previous frameworks?
I'll take that. Well, there's a lot of you who were not on the 2016 framework, and that's not a problem. But I'm sure, at least I hope, that you will have preferably other customers outside of the GÉANT or a new framework in the research and education sector. If you would not have those, you could look at reference cases from other countries where you may be operating, where you would have research and or education institutions as customers. If you don't have those, well, the next best thing, I think, would be not-for-profit organizations and or government contracts. If you have only commercial customers, then or financial or whatever, then it may be difficult, and it may be that you submitted a bit to expand your customer base. And then it's up to you to have to find a way to get in there. What you could do is try to find an institution who's doing an interesting pilot, who's willing to do an interesting pilot, and see if you can co-fund that. So to lower the barrier for initial usage and generate use cases out of that. And you could steer on an institution who's able to execute quickly, whose project is not too long running, and you could maybe have a use case in 3 months' time for a limited amount of cost. Up to you.
Thank you, Michel. All right, the next question is, hello, will you share by email the slide presentation? Thank you. We generally will upload all the presentations onto the event page on the Okra website, as well as the recording of the webinar. So that will go up within a day or so after this webinar. So if you need to go back for reference or you missed the beginning, that's where you can find everything on the Okra website, which is okra-project.eu. Okay, so next question is, what are plans with localization of agreements? We have a lot of questions coming from Spain and France primarily, and this is from Daniel Bachelik.
I'm not sure Daniel, what you mean with localization. I mean, the framework is signed for France and or Spain for the appropriate reseller. If I'm not mistaken, both countries are refer, hence give the cloud manager a call, or have the winning reseller, in your case, if the cloud manager and then cloud manager a call, and or introduce yourself in the same call. Once again, I'm not sure what you meant with localization.
Daniel, if I might give you the microphone if you want to explain yourself better.
Yeah, sure, thanks. So we had questions from Spanish and French institutions about localization of a call-off agreements into Spanish and French. It makes this obviously much easier for them to sign and understand rather than in English. Thank you.
Now I understand it. Joseph, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, thank you. Am I unmuted? Yeah, thank you very much. We haven't discussed this because we have provided the template of the call-off agreement as part of the framework agreement in English in the original language and no other languages. We could provide a side-by-side translation, like a bilingual version for these countries, but we worked on the basis of English only at this point. And we haven't considered this. We haven't considered this question, to be honest.
And if we would start there, where would we stop? I mean, we would go into the different dialects in countries. It would be a huge understanding, and legally there's a limited value in there, because in the end I think the English will have to be signed, because otherwise you may come into interpretation
issues. Yeah.
Right, thank you. The next question from Christian Perisic is, what is the service order protocol? Do we know what he's talking about?
Yes, I might take that. I think what he's asking, what is the order through which this goes? Well, it is the signing of the framework first, then it is the signing of the call-off contract, either directly with the NREN or directly with the institution second. And only after that, in case you are a reseller, there may be signed a contract specifically for that platform, mostly talking about the big American platforms. So that would be the order: first framework, then a call-off contract, and then an enrollment, or whatever you may want to call it.
Thanks, Misha. All right, the next question is there any SLA with NRENs on support of the framework locally?
So I'm not sure if one of the NREN participants wants to pick that up, but you know, as far as I see it, the call-off agreements will exist between the suppliers and the institutes, and where the NRENs are well resourced and resourced certainly well enough to participate extensively in providing platforms for webinars, training, etc., then they will do so. It is in the NREN's interest to extend their service portfolios in all countries, and they will, where resourced appropriately, they will be doing that. But I don't think there's an actual SLA in place, because the framework contracts certainly support the relationship between the supplier and the institute, without any relationship with the NREN at all. I'm not sure if one of the NREN participants wants.
I think Garvin wanted to say something.
Yeah. So there is no SLA. Dave is spot on. As Dave has mentioned, the different NRENs are at different levels of maturity in terms of how they support their institutions in cloud adoption, and there is across Europe quite a different level of maturity for the consumption of cloud services in institutions. At a bald level, if you take a line roughly from the south of Spain and draw it sort of diagonally across just around Italy and up towards up towards the Baltic. The people who are on the left-hand side of that seem to be more advanced in the consumption of cloud services by institutions. So what we're doing historically Central and Eastern Europe and down to the Balkans are not as mature in their consumption of cloud services. So the different NRANs are at different levels of maturity. The different institutions in country are at different levels of maturity. So I hope that helps. Thank you.
Thanks, Gavin. I just saw someone who was, as an anonymous attendee, said, who do we send the logos to? We haven't seen that request, but because you wrote as an anonymous attendee, I'm not sure which organization you're from. So if you could write in the chat, maybe your organization, that way we can make sure we send the email to you as well. Okay, the next question is, when or where can we pose technical questions in relation to the SSO facility required to be in place within 6 months of the framework agreement? It sounds like customer usage is unlikely within that time frame.
I'll take that in the absence of anybody else. So in the previous framework, we had, I think, off the top of my head, about 17 countries where there was active adoption. And it was a requirement for providers in the previous framework to support the single sign-on or SAML2 OIDC functionality. We will publicize some links to you to the standards that are used, et cetera, et cetera. But in each country, each NRAN operates a national SAML2 or OIDC based facility to provide authentication services amongst institutions. There is a GÉANT level 1 as well, which it's got out of the top of my head, the name of it, we put it in the notes, that allows federation across countries. So we'll put some links to the standards and the interfaces that are required. But if you have for example, if you were a provider in Spain, then you should contact the Spanish NRAN to discover what the Spanish flavor of the implementation of the single sign-on is. In Ireland, it's called Educate. There's a website, educate.ie. Each of the NRANs has a similar sort of setup.
Cheers, Gavin. All right, so the next question is there any update on schedule of calls for projects? And now I think Jan wanted to answer this one.
Yep, thanks, Zach. So we're currently working on actually the implementation phase of the first call for cloud projects. And based on the experiences that we now have with that first call and how this is all going to work out, we're going to have a conversation with the Okra External Advisory Board on the strategy for the remaining adoption funding that we have available for cloud services. And that conversation is going to take place early February. So I expect us to have a look at revised planning for cloud adoption projects during February.
Cool, thanks, Jan. Someone asked how to become an EO provider, an Earth observation provider.
So I'm happy to pick that up, and Olaf might also just want to comment in terms of timeline. But we will be publishing a dynamic procurement system shortly. This has been delayed based on the extensive amount of work that we have focused on the cloud tender, but it's also dependent on, for example, the structuring of the contracts on the cloud tender, because the contracts will follow a very similar structure. So we will be publishing a dynamic procurement system shortly. The publication of this we will use various channels to kind of reach out into the market to make sure that everybody knows about the publication. Once this is published and suppliers have registered on the DPS, there will also be opportunities for additional suppliers to register before we run the invitation to tender for each of the Earth Observation Service calls. But if we will be distributing a lot of information about this as we finalize timing.
Yes, maybe just to add on that, because David says it's true, and we are very aware of the fact that we already indicated earlier that it will be launched very quickly. But I just want to explain it in a few words why that it's taking longer. So you've all been part of this tender process. And basically, if as you have noticed in the tender, there is room to react on our tender documents. There's room to react on our contract. But and then in the end, it is a contract has been awarded, but there will be another opportunities to converse between yourselves, the institutes, and the NRENs in the future. There's a bit of a difference in the Earth observation side, because what we are trying to establish is a DPS or dynamic purchasing systems. And one of the characteristics there is that at the moment of the publication, we more or less do need to have the contract ready. And in the contract, as Jan also explained on the cloud services, there will be a three-party contract between the supplier, Géant, and the institute. And in that contract, we need to make sure that the cost, or basically the EC, is funding all these Earth observation projects. We have to find a way how these costs can be claimed back to the EC, while also dealing with a number of VAT issues, and that is actually a very difficult project and of jigsaw to make, if you like, and unlike in the cloud tender, we have to come up with a complete bulletproof agreement from the start of this whole project. And unlike as in the tender we've just gone through, we have to have everything ready as of day one. But it also needs to get approvals from auditors, from the EC, in order to make sure we come up with a compliant route of handling the finances. And that is what it makes it so difficult, because there's no precedent set in Europe for this. We had to reinvent the wheel, but we have to make sure the wheel's being reinvented before we know what the rest of the vehicle looks like. So that is where we are dealing with. And Dave was right in saying we are on the brink of being there, which is completely true. But I'm also aware of the fact that we have already been saying that over the past 3 months. So that I can understand that there are some thoughts about that timeline. But it's expected to go on soon, and we obviously will communicate it via the Okra site when the DPS is launched. It will also be published on a more formal channels, as on the tender websites hosted by the European Community.
So thanks, Olaf. I think Garvin wanted to come in and say something about the question before that one.
Yeah, just back on the single sign on the SAML 2, the Géant service is called EduGain. So for providers who might be new to the education market, there's a website, edugain.org. By becoming a provider in EduGain is the quickest way for you to get mass availability of your service across multiple countries. If you're only active in one country, then you should maybe just contact the NREN in that country. And just to reiterate on the consumption, there is under the previous framework, there was active consumption in 17 countries. So I think the adoption, the consumption, there is consumption under the previous framework that needs to go to new homes in this new framework. And then I think the timelines that Michel was describing earlier in the presentation was about in those countries or institutions who are not active consumers of IaaS services. Thank you.
Thanks, Gavin. All right, so next question. Can you please explain the NREN cost recovery percentages? What exactly does this mean for a supplier, partner, or reseller?
I'll take that, Zach. Olivia, I think those are pretty well described in the tender documents. There are a number of questions asked in the Q&A, but basically it is a percentage the NREN needs to deliver the support, and that is charged by the NREN to the reseller or supplier in a refer country only. And the percentage is less than 5%, and that is communicated per country by the JL team. I'd like to leave it at that, because otherwise it becomes a long discussion.
Gavin?
And I act as a referrer for my clients. We organize workshops, facilitate outreach events. That's what we use. We're not for profit, right? But we're obviously not for loss. So the service charge that we applied, that's what that's used to support. And it is not out of your margin. It's on top of your bill, just in case there's any confusion on that.
Okay, thank you, Gavin. And I think we're going to need to wrap up soon. I just saw another question got asked. Maybe someone can answer Andrea privately, or Andrea's answer with a message. But we'll answer the last question that was already in the chat. Can someone explain something about EOSC in relation to Okra and Jayon? Sorry.
I'm happy to do that. EOSC is the European Open Science Cloud, and it is a landscape of projects that is funded by the European Commission. Okra is one of those projects. The Okra project was funded by the European Commission. The Okra project ran the cloud tender and is setting up the framework on behalf of the broader European research and education community. Jayon is managing the project, and Jayon acts as a central procuring entity in some respects. The Jayon project is funded by the European Commission, and within the Jayon project there, we will be handling a lot of the contract management. So Jayon as an entity supports the European Open Science Cloud, and the Okra project is one of the EOSC projects. The European Open Science Cloud will be launching a new project this year called EOSC Future. And we do anticipate that a lot of the activities within the EOSC Future project will be consuming resources through the Okra Cloud framework. So there is a lot of opportunity presented to yourselves as suppliers to actually supply services to the broader European Open Science Cloud landscape. I'm not sure if that answers the question.
Thanks, David. Yep, and they've written thanks, so it did answer the question. So is someone able to answer this question from Andrea? We received a list of cost recovery fee for a number of countries, but not for all. What about the rest?
Yeah, I can pick it up. We have been writing to all the NRENs asking which percentage they wanted to use in 2021. And the list we've communicated earlier this week, if I'm not mistaken, is the overview of the answers we received so far. And obviously, we cannot make a decision on behalf of an NREN who have not submitted their percentage back to us. We will be re-engaging with the NREN saying, well, you're still lacking us that answer. But as indicated earlier during this webinar, by the launch of that website that is mentioned, you will be given the contact details for all the NRENs. So you also have an opportunity now to engage directly with the applicable NREN.
Thanks, Olaf. Now, I just wanted to check with the panelists. We had some questions sent in before the event, and I've sent them to you in the chat, panelists. And if there's any that have not been answered that you would be able to answer, we can answer them now.
I'll take that answer. I'm sorry, I don't know the number of suppliers in Slovenia a lot. If you are a framework holder, you will receive in the framework a link where all the other suppliers who have been awarded a framework in Slovenia are listed. The contact cloud manager will be shared on a central basis. Services can be added to a cloud catalog as long as they are in scope of the tender, and they have to be recorded in a way which was described in the tender and in the framework.
Yes, and Michel, and again, I'm going to emphasize it again, because I really understand that everybody's really curious to which other frameworks are awarded in that lot. But it's a bit of a catch-22 situation, because we can only give that information if all the frameworks are signed. So we can only communicate which other platforms, suppliers are in a lot when all the contracts are signed. And as I've said, just under 200 contracts are not signed yet. So we are not able to provide a full overview of everything yet, because basically the ball is in your court. You have to sign a contract, and then we can be fully transparent on which contracts are available in which countries.
Thanks, Olaf, and thanks, Michel. If there's any of these other questions that you guys would like to answer, maybe read out the question as well, because it's not everyone can see it.
Okay, I'll take one more. Speaking about the invoicing process, who is the recipient of the invoices, Okra, NREN, or other? It depends on the role of the country. Is it a defer, then the invoices are sent to the institution? Is it? But you're too generic. I mean, if it's an underwriter, it's normally the NREN the invoices are sent to, and in case it is a mini competition for a cloud funding, the invoices are sent to Sheant. But honestly, this is in the tender document, guys. In case of a consortium, can we manage invoicing? Well, in the case of a consortium, the lead organization will do the invoicing using the process I just described. Thank you.
Cool. I don't know if there are any final questions. I would encourage you all to visit the Okra website and to follow Okra on Twitter and LinkedIn. As we said, the press release for this will be released today, and it'll be posted on website and socials, and we'll make sure that we send it to all of you so that you can use it as you deem fit. And I think we can wrap up there. Are there any last words from the panelists? All right. Thank you everyone for coming, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.